Hello everyone and welcome back to my Warhammer 40k guides. I am Brady and today I would like to talk about the new specialist detachments that were introduced in the Vigilus Defiant campaign book. These special detachments are legal for tournament play, so I figured I would dive right into them and let you guys and gals know which ones I think are viable for competitive play. First off, let me say that I think that all of the specialist attachments have uses, so feel free to use any of the ones that you like in casual games since they all seem to have some cool rules that are really fun. But when it comes to competitive play, some of the specialist attachments came with better and stronger rules than the others, so these are the ones that I want to concentrate on in this video. So in this video, I will talk about the specialist attachments that I think are viable for competitive play. And then I will have a short segment towards the end of the video where I quickly go over a few of the specialist attachments that I think are pretty strong but not necessarily competitively viable. Also, for a couple of disclaimers, this video is based off of my opinions, so take this information as you will with that in mind. Also, I will be referring to these specialist attachments as formations for the rest of the video, since it's much more convenient for me to just say formation instead of specialist attachment dozens of times. So with that said, this video was sponsored by themagnetbaron.com. The Magnet Baron offers magnets of all sizes, magnetized movement trays, magnetized flight stands, and a bunch of other goodies. I use magnets from the Magnet Baron myself and can say that they are great magnets and that they work very well. So if you're looking at picking up some magnet related things for your hobby, then check out themagnetbaron.com. A link to their website will be in the description. So now let's jump into what you guys and gals came here for, and that is the formations that I think are competitively viable. The first formation that I think is competitively viable is the Anointed Throng formation for the Genestealer cults. This formation is one command point and is used on a Genestealer cult detachment and gives abominants and aberrants in that detachment the Anointed Throng keyword. So what makes me like this formation is pretty much everything it has to offer. The Warlord trait gives +1 to charge rolls for the Warlord and friendly Anointed Throng units that are within 6 inches of the Warlord when the charge roll is made. The relic is a super hammer that you put on one of your abominants that is -4 AP, d6 damage, and damage rolls of 1 or 2 count as 3 damage. So this weapon is pretty beastly, especially when you consider that it doesn't suffer from -1 to hit like most hammers in the game do. The first stratagem for this formation is called Devotion Till Death. This stratagem is 2 command points and allows you to pick a unit with the Anointed Throng keyword at the beginning of the fight phase. So this can be done on either player's turn since it doesn't say in your fight phase. Until the end of the phase, when a model from the selected unit is slain, it can immediately pile in and fight before you remove it from the table. So this can be useful when one of your aberrant units gets charged by a Knight or Magnus or even Thunderhammer Marines, basically anything that's going to kill a decent amount of your models. This allows your guys to swing back before they die so that they don't go down without doing some damage themselves. And when you consider all the support that they should be getting from all of your support characters, they should do some decent damage. You can use this in your fight phase as well if you do the math hammer and determine that you don't have enough attacks to kill your target and that the target is going to hit you back pretty hard after your attacks are finished. Because it is stated in the stratagem that you can still swing after your model dies even if it is already attacked earlier in the phase. So there is that option as well. And the second and final stratagem is called Fight for the Anointed One, which is 1 command point and is used at the start of your fight phase. You pick an Anointed Throng aberrant unit that is within 6 inches of an Anointed Throng abominant, and you can reroll wound rolls for the attacks for the aberrant unit until the end of the phase. So basically more buffs for your already stacked unit, since in my opinion, aberrants and the support they get is one of the strongest parts of the Genestealer cult. So overall, I think this formation is one of the better formations in the book, and will most likely see some play in competitive, since Genestealer cult and aberrants were already pretty good, and now this just gives them a few more options, which in my opinion makes them even better. The second formation that I think will see some competitive play is the Emperor's Wrath Artillery Company. This formation is 1 command point and is used to upgrade an Astra Militarum detachment so that company commanders, masters of ordnance, basilisks, hydras, and wyverns in the detachment gain the Emperor's Wrath keyword, which allows them to benefit from rules for this formation. So the Warlord trait is a 6-inch aura ability that gives an extra -1 AP to your Emperor's Wrath units when they roll a 6+ to wound. So I see this being especially good on wyverns since they have a large amount of shots, which means a better chance to roll those 6s to wound, and also because you'll most likely be shooting at infantry with them, and that change from 0 AP to -1 AP does help a bit. On basilisks, this is alright since they go from -3 to -4 and cancels out most armor saves in the game. But against the usual targets of this meta, like Imperial Knights or Magnus, that extra -1 doesn't really help because those targets have invulnerable saves anyways. But against normal vehicles, this can ensure you cut through their armor to get that damage through if you roll a 6 to wound. And it's okay to take this Warlord trait over Grand Strategist now because of the change of the way that we regenerate command points. So I think it would be okay to take this Warlord trait and to just take the Kirov's Aquila relic for your command point regen. But to be honest, when playing guard, you most likely have another faction in your list like Imperial Knights or Ultramarines or Custodes, so you probably want to take one of their warlord traits instead. But if you're playing a full Astra Militarum army, which is still competitively viable, then I think this trait is pretty decent if you have 5 or 6 vehicles to benefit from it, especially if you're using some wyverns. The relic for this formation is decent as well, but I wouldn't take it in every game, so it is situational. What this relic does is that you can pick an Emperor's Wrath unit that is within 6 inches of the bearer during your shooting phase. And for that phase, enemy units being shot at by that unit do not receive the benefit of cover. So you can use this on something like a Wyvern to try and take out those Dark Reapers or Devastators that are hiding in a ruin. And this is even better when combined with the Warlord trait, and can also be combined with the stratagem that I'm about to get into. So the first stratagem I'm going to talk about is the Pounding Barrage stratagem. And for 2 command points, you can make an Emperor's Wrath unit fire one of its weapons twice. So you pick a Wyvern and have it shoot 2 volleys of 4d6 shots for 8d6 altogether. I assume both volleys have to be at the same target, so keep that in mind. But it may be FAQ'd that you can shoot at different targets, but either way, I still think this is really good, especially with armies like Orcs making their way into the meta. You can also combine this with the Relic to ignore cover, and your opponent can say goodbye to the unit they were trying to keep safe. You can also use this on a Basilisk as well if you need those extra shots against something like a Knight or a Demon Primarch, so there's that option as well. Which, by the way, I would probably only bring Wyverns and Basilisks in this formation because I still don't think Hydras are that good. And the last thing to talk about is the other stratagem, which is called Suppressive Fire. This stratagem is 1 command point and used at the start of your shooting phase. You pick 1 Emperor's Wrath unit in your army and it cannot shoot that phase. And then you pick 1 enemy infantry unit, and until your next turn, that enemy infantry unit cannot fire Overwatch and only moves half of their distance. This can be really good against Horde armies like Tyranids or other Astra Militarum or Orcs. You can use it to negate Overwatch for when your Catachan infantry or Bulgrin are going in for an attack, but more often than not, I would just use this to have the movement of a big infantry squad like Orc Boys or Genestealers. Or if the enemy was dumb enough to have layers of infantry, you can do it on the front layer and it slows down their whole army because they're stuck behind the slow guys. If I was up against a Horde army, I would most likely use a Basilisk to do this, since you forfeit its shots for that turn, and Basilisks aren't that great at killing Hordes anyways, since at most you kill 6 models, and that's only if you roll like a god. So I think in certain situations it would be better to give up those shots and slow down the opponent's army, which can give your army more turns to lay down the pain on them. So overall, I think this is a great formation, and will most likely see some play in competitive. And the third and final formation that I think is competitively viable is the Emperor's Conclave Infantry Company. This formation is 1 command point and is used on an Astra Militarum detachment. And company commanders, platoon commanders, command squads, veterans, infantry squads, conscripts, Ministorum priests, and Crusaders in that detachment gain the Emperor's Conclave keyword. I think this formation works best with Catachan, so assume I am talking about Catachan Guard when talking about the rules this formation gives. So for the Warlord trait, it's alright, but to be honest, I would take something else. Like the Warlord trait from the Emperor's Wrath Artillery Company if you brought one of those in your army as well in a separate detachment, or a Warlord trait for another faction that you might have allied in like Imperial Knights, Custodes, or any other Imperial faction. So getting back on topic, the Warlord trait gives rerolls of 1s to your Warlord and Emperor's Conclave's units within 6 inches. So don't get me wrong, this is still pretty good, but I think depending on your list there are probably better options. As for the relic, it's actually very useful. Units within 6 inches of the bearer take morale tests on 2d6 and pick the lowest result, which is pretty nice for your infantry squads, and in addition, if the bearer is slain, you can pick an Emperor's Conclave unit within 6 inches of him to become fearless and gain +1 attack to its attack characteristics. So if I'm interpreting this correctly, this means that if the bearer dies near a super blob of infantry that was created from combining squads, then your blob is now fearless and each model gets +1 attack since it changes their attack characteristic on the datasheet. Combine that with +1 attack from Strachan and +1 attack from a Ministorum priest, and you have a fearless blob that has 4 attacks each per model at strength 4 because of Catachan. Now of course this is super situational, but I mean you can kind of force it by suiciding the bearer into a unit that will for sure kill him, so that way you make sure that the second part of the ability goes off. There's also a neat little combo that you can do with this too that I will get into in a minute. As for the stratagems, the first stratagem is 2 command points and is called No Quarter Given, and it is used at the start of the fight phase, so either at the start of your fight phase or the start of your opponent's fight phase, as it doesn't specify either player's turn. So you select an Emperor's Conclave unit in your army, and until the end of that phase, when a model dies, it can pile in an attack before you remove it from the board. So essentially, this is the same stratagem as the Genestealer Cult stratagem that I talked about earlier. So how I would use this stratagem is I would pick my blob of Catachan Guard that was formed through combining squads, and when it gets charged by something like Genestealers or Orc Boys or infantry units that are going to kill some models, I would activate this stratagem so that way my blob can put in some damage before they go down, especially when you consider all of the buffs they will be getting from support characters like Strachan and a Ministorum Priest. And like the Genestealer Cult stratagem, you can use this stratagem on your turn as well if you're charging a big target and through Math Hammer you've determined that you won't kill the target and will be taking some casualties afterwards. This way you can get even more hits in before those models go down. Although, to be honest, this is very situational, so more often than not, you'll just be using the stratagem in your opponent's turn when you get charged. And the second and final stratagem for this formation is called Sanctimonious Charge. It is 1 command point, and you activate it after an Emperor's Conclave Ministorum Priest makes a charge. Until the end of that phase, you can add 1 to charge rolls for friendly Emperor's Conclave units within 12 inches of the priest. So to be honest, this stratagem is alright, but it can backfire pretty hard. Because if the priest dies, then you lose out on that +1 attack that he gives your Catachan blob. But if he does make it, then you give a better chance for your blob to actually make their charge. You can make a decent little combo out of this as well, which is what I was mentioning earlier, that kinda makes this a win-win. And that is to give your priest the relic that we talked about earlier. So this way, if the priest makes his charge, then you get your +1 charge for your other unit. But if he dies in Overwatch, then you just made your Catachan blob fearless, and they still get the +1 attack permanently now anyways. So this stratagem is useful, especially when combined with that relic on the Ministorum Priest. So with all of these things considered, my overall opinion on this formation is that this is a very good formation, especially for Catachan forces that bring a lot of infantry, which is mainly how we've been seeing Catachan being played for the last few months anyways. So it gave more options to an army that was already very strong. As for my overall opinion on all the formations in general, as you can see, I think the only formations that are worth running in competitive Warhammer are the ones that consist of units that we're already seeing play in competitive Warhammer. Essentially, the only formations that I think would be viable for competitive play are based around armies and units that were already strong in the tournament scene. So pretty much the strongest armies just became stronger. I personally don't feel like any of these formations are so strong that you would actually go out of your way to build an army around them. And the ones that I think will see competitive play are the ones that complement tournament lists that have already proven themselves to be competitively viable. So I don't think any of these formations are going to change the meta too much at all, and things should stay relatively the same as they were before the introduction of these formations. I think Games Workshop realized that making formations so strong that it dictates the way you build your list would be bad for the game as it was in 7th edition. So with these new formations, I feel like they went a little tame and just made them like tiny bonuses for armies that you would have normally played anyways. That's how I feel about them anyways. So really quickly, let me go over a couple of the other formations that I think have potential, but to be honest, I don't think that they are competitive worthy. So the first one I want to talk about is the Indomitus Crusaders formation. At first I thought this formation was broken, but that was because I had read the stratagems wrong and didn't realize that you needed your intercessors to not only be upgraded to veterans, but also because the 3 stratagems for those veterans all work on different variations of the bolters that they come with. If those 3 bolter stratagems were for the same type of bolters, and therefore could be combined for a super combo, then I think this formation would be competitively viable. Because if it worked like the way I thought, then you could have your bolters with 4 shots each, auto-hitting, and doing mortal wounds on rolls of 6+, which would be very nutty. And it would basically delete units off the table. But because each stratagem works on different bolter variants, they aren't stackable. And also, I don't think that they are worth it individually because you have to invest so much into using them in the first place because you have to upgrade your intercessor squads for 1 command point each just to gain access to those stratagems. So you'd have to pay 1 command point for the formation itself and then 1 command point each for your intercessor squads, which I would say to bring at least 3 or 4 to even make this usable, so that's spending like 5 command points right away, and that's just too much to spend on a combo that's just okay in my opinion. But with all of that said, the Warlord trait is actually really good, since you can get a free chapter tactic which gives you more options. And also the relic is pretty decent as well that makes Psychers suffer -1 to cast, and if they happen to fail a spell, then on a 4+, you do D3 mortal wounds to them. So that's actually pretty good as well. But with all things considered, I think that everything that this formation offers is kinda lackluster and expensive when compared to other stratagems the Imperium army has to offer. I still think this is a good formation, I just don't think it's competitively viable since it's a huge command point sink. Compare all the command points you're going to sink into this formation to something like a Castellan that is also a command point sink. That Castellan is just going to put in much more work than this formation ever will. The second formation that I think is strong but not necessarily competitively viable is the Ravenwing attack squadron. The stratagems are actually pretty good. Being able to leave combat after you attack and before you get hit back is actually really strong. And adding 1 to hit rolls for all your units is really strong as well. But I think that the Black Knights are still a bit too expensive for what they offer, and that the Imperium army has better things to offer overall. The Space Wolf Stalker pack is another formation that I think has potential, but just isn't good enough for competitive play. The stratagem to add 1 to wound rolls is pretty good, but it only works on a unit that has already been wounded. So I guess you can do your attacks 1 at a time, and if they get wounded, you can then activate the stratagem for the rest of your attacks, but that's still situational depending on the unit fighting and the unit being targeted. So it's alright, but not necessarily the best. And the charging stratagem is good as well, but also situational as you need to make a charge for it to work. And the units' formation effects aren't necessarily the greatest units in the codex to begin with. The only quote-unquote good unit in my opinion is the battle leader, and that's if you make him like a smash captain. And the last formation that I think has potential, but I personally don't feel will be competitively viable, is the Emperor's Fist Tank Company. And that's because I still don't necessarily think that Leman Russes are competitively viable, even after chapter approved. I could be wrong on this though, since I haven't tested them out much, but I assume that they will still suffer from the same problems that they did before. Getting outmaneuvered, dying too easily, and getting tied up in combat. Well anyways, that's going to be it for this video. Before you go, don't forget to check out the channel's other sponsor, 9.5 Miniature Painting. 9.5 Miniature Painting is run by a guy named Mike who is an extremely talented painter, and he gives good rates for commissions as well. I've had him paint up some of my miniatures and I am more than happy with the way that they turned out. So if you have a big pile of plastic that you've been reluctant on painting, or even just a few characters that you want painted really well, then 9.5 Miniature Painting can help you with that. If you would like to get in contact with 9.5 Miniature Painting to maybe set up a painting commission, I will have a link to his Instagram in the description. Send him a message on there to get started. So anyways, I hope you guys and gals enjoyed this video, and let me know what you think of the new formations or specialist detachments down in the comments. Also, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more Warhammer 40k content like this. Anyways, thanks again for watching, and I will see you in the next video. Happy wargaming.